Hey y'all, it's Danny with Escape Power Sports, and today I want to show y'all step by step how to get a 3,500 pound winch on your Polaris RZR for right at 150 bucks. But before we get right into the step by step installation of this winch, there are a few things that are worth mentioning real quick. First being, if your budget allows for a higher quality winch than our $100 Harbor Freight special here, there's a ton of great options out there, and installations can be nearly identical to what we show you today. And in my opinion, adding a winch to your machine is a great way to add to its capabilities on a budget. But I'm curious to know, so let me know in the comments what your favorite upgrade or accessory is. Now this job's not as difficult as you might be thinking, but it can be fairly time consuming. So I'd really like to encourage you to watch the video all the way through and see if I can't save you a little time or frustration. Also like to make sure I have a full Saturday afternoon set aside and at least a 6-pack of beer for this job, so let's get started.
Installing a winch is really only two main parts, mounting it and wiring it. This video will be perfect for anyone working on a RZR 800, but my hope is it'll still be very helpful for anyone installing a winch on anything, as the wiring will be very similar, if not identical. The only difference will be the process for mounting the winch to the bike, and these mounting kits come with pretty good instructions for any machine and mount. Let's get right into part 1, mounting the winch to your machine. If safety is a priority, never a bad idea to remove the driver's seat and disconnect the battery, starting with the negative lead before beginning work. We will start removing the front fascia by unplugging the headlights, pushing down on the tab. And if they're being stubborn, a little electronics cleaner will usually remove any debris, allowing them to unplug smoothly. Next, we will remove the hood by turning these two knobs a quarter turn in. Then we can start on the front fascia itself with these two pop rivets. And if one breaks, don't stress, they can usually be pulled out by pushing the pin out from behind. We'll make sure to get the same two pop rivets on the other side. Next, we can remove the winch access panel with its 4 Phillips screws and set it aside as it won't be reinstalled. I also find it's helpful to bag and label parts as they come off so I don't lose them. Now all that's holding the front fascia on are these 6 Torx 27 star bolts, and it's worth noting the longer 2 bolts are for the top 2 holes. Now we have access to install our 2 winch mount plates. Both these plates and this hardware were included with the KFI winch mounts for this machine I found on eBay. This is where the front of these winch plates attach, with the 9/16 bolt coming in from the back, then our washer and 9/16 lock nut on the front of the machine. I found it's easiest to just attach and not tighten these bolts in the front at first. Then I bolted down the rear of the plates with the 9/16 bolt, which threads into the mount here, and finished the job by coming and tightening up the front. On the driver's side, we will need to snip the zip ties securing these lines to get the clearance necessary for the winch plate. We will repeat this procedure for the other winch plate by attaching in the front first, securing the bolt in the rear, and finish by tightening the bolt and lock nut we attached in the front. We will also secure the front diff breather hose to this frame rail to allow room for our winch. Next, we can slide our winch into place, making sure the cable or rope will feed off the bottom of the spool. This had our winch oriented with the electrical connections on the passenger side, and bolted down, securing it with the 4 13mm bolts and lock washers provided with the winch. And I've heard these steel cables can be dangerous and also may deteriorate faster than synthetic rope, but I like the old school look of the steel cable too much to worry about replacing it. Feel free to comment below which one you prefer. And of course the puppy thinks it's funny to knock the camera over. Now it's time to mount the fairlead that came with the winch to the fairlead bracket included in the KFI winch plate kit. I attached these together with a 13mm bolt, washer, and 14mm nut provided with the winch. To attach this fairlead bracket, we will need to release the winch cable and run it through now, as it will be more difficult once it's bolted to the machine. Here are the 4 holes on the RZR frame that we will use to attach the fairlead bracket. Attaching the lower bolts on the front first by running the bolts from the inside, then adding our washers and lock nuts. Then securing the top 2 bolts between the radiator and the winch, with the bolts facing up, and washers and lock nuts to follow. And finish by tightening our bolts on the front. All 4 of these 13mm bolts, washers, and 13mm lock nuts were included with the KFI winch plates and fairlead bracket. Now is as good a time as any to attach the winch hook with its retaining pin and smaller cotter pin. Can't forget our fancy little red strap thing. Now our winch and fairlead are securely mounted to the machine, so we can reinstall our front fascia's 6 Torx 27 star bolts, remembering the longer 2 go at the top. Then I replaced the 4 pop rivets I broke earlier, 2 on each side of the front fascia. And I like to replace these anyway because a big bag of them is cheap, and I find it very handy to have fresh pop rivets available for when they inevitably break or fall out. Finally, just pop the hood back on and plug in our headlights, and the easy half of this job is done. Now we got our winch successfully mounted to the machine. Now's a great time to run to that corner store for another 6-pack of beer and strap in for part 2, where we'll be tackling winch wiring. I like to start the wiring process by finding a good place to mount the little black box that came with our winch called the Solenoid. marking with a Sharpie and drilling holes that will allow us to secure it later on with the Phillips bolts and 7mm lock nuts that came with our winch. And I like this spot pretty good because it keeps the connections out of the weather, and the 4 big wires will be able to reach both our winch and the battery. And notice which direction you'll want your wires to run. In this case, it'll be to the left towards the driver's side. Now we can head to the bench and attach the 4 big wires to the color-coordinated posts on the solenoid. The big blue and yellow wires will eventually attach to the color-coordinated terminals on the winch, with the red and black headed for the positive and negative terminals on the battery. I almost forgot to mention to attach these annoying protective rubber boots to each end of the wires to protect from corrosion. It's also a good idea to coat these connections with dielectric grease, but unfortunately I ran out, so we'll just have to do without on this one. And as I understand it, this solenoid does a couple things: reducing the current to and from switches as not to fry them, reversing the polarity to allow the winch to go in or out depending on which button we press, and some other science magnetic stuff I don't know nothing about. So with all 4 wires attached and our solenoid mounted up, we can begin running our blue and yellow wires out of the interior of the machine towards the winch. And I'm a big believer that running and securing wires with zip ties is more of an art than a science, but I found these frame rails to do the job nicely. Then we can attach these 2 leads to the color coordinated posts on our winch. We will put the lead between the 2 washers and secure it with a 10mm nut. All of this hardware came with the winch right out of the box. Now I found the most direct way to get these red and black wires to the battery without having them exposed in the cab of the vehicle is to remove the center console. And to remove the center console, I started by pulling out the seats by pulling up on the tab at the rear of the seat cushion. Then popped off the shifter cap with the flathead, exposing the Torx 25 star bolt to remove the shifter handle itself. Now to get the center console out, all that's left are these 11 Torx 27 star screws. When I was bagging these screws, I was sure to notice the longer 2 go to the 2 furthest to the rear. I chose to start running the black and red wires through the same hole as the winch wires to keep them out of sight of the riders. And unfortunately, the circuit breaker on the battery side of the red wire would not fit through this hole, so I just temporarily removed it. Now we can pull our red and black wires back into the cab at the bottom and eventually secure them under the floor where they will be out of the cabin, out of the elements, and safe from the spinning front drive shaft. And at this point I could reattach the circuit breaker with its 13mm bolt, washer, lock washer, and 14mm nut. I'm also a big fan of wrapping the circuit breaker in electrical tape so it doesn't short out on the frame. To secure these wires on the exterior of the firewall with zip ties, I drilled matching 7/32 holes about an inch apart and bent some zip ties so it'd be easier to get them to hook back in, and it came out clean enough for me. Also think it's pretty important to drill some holes and secure the wires under the floor to make sure they stay clear of the front drive shaft. With our solenoid mounted up and our wires ran to the battery and to the winch, it's time for the fun part of any wiring job: switches. Let's start with a remote plug that will allow us to operate the winch from outside the machine. Sorry to interrupt the how-to here, but I really hope you're finding this video helpful with your winch install. And if it is, do me a quick favor and give it a thumbs up. But if the video is too boring, here's a few clips of this RZR playing in the snow to help alleviate the boring nature of a technical wiring job. Alright, fun's over. Back to mounting this remote plug. We'll start by picking a good spot on the dash and marking it with a Sharpie. Being sure to check for any wires behind the dash in that location, and drilling a pilot hole before switching to a step-up drill bit. I'd stop fairly often as I got close to check to see if the plug would fit yet. I ended up with about a 1-inch hole for a perfect fit. Then we can secure it by drilling a 5/32 hole and pegging this side with a Phillips bolt that came with the winch plate hardware. And following suit on the top hole, and securing these bolts with a washer and 9/32 lock nut on the back. Now it's time to mount what I call the handlebar switch, looking for a spot where it's easily accessible to the driver. The spot tucked right under the dash on the driver's side seemed perfect, so I snipped the zip tie and secured the switch with the 4mm Allen bolts and 5/16 lock nuts. And it's a good idea to work carefully with these bolts as I found they strip very easily, especially with an impact. I also like to mount this switch horizontally as it's a little more intuitive for me for the winch inside of the switch to be facing the inside of the machine. So now that we have the solenoid and switches mounted to the machine, I figured now is a good time to slow the video down and show in detail how to wire these 2 switches. Let's start with the remote plug we mounted on the dash of the bike. It's going to allow us to plug in this handy remote and operate the winch from outside the machine. There are 4 wires coming from this remote plug. Let's start with the red and white wires with the eye hooks. The red wire with the eye hook will attach to the red post on our solenoid. The white wire with the eye hook will attach to the black terminal on our solenoid. And the green and black wires have connectors to attach to the corresponding green and black wires coming from the front of the solenoid. We'll attach green to green and black to black. You'll notice these green and black wires have additional connectors that pigtail back, which is about to come in handy. Now for wiring the handlebar switch. These green and black wires simply attach to the 2 extra connectors from the remote plug I just mentioned. Again, we'll go green to green and black to black.
So now that we've got our remote plug wired up and the green and black connectors from our handlebar switch plugged in, all that's left is this little red wire coming from the handlebar switch. So what to do with this little red wire? Well, we need to plug it into a wire on the machine that gets power when the ignition is on. And one of the simplest ways to tap into a wire that has power when the ignition is on is to tap our little red wire into the power wire for the cigarette lighter on the bike using these T wire tapping connectors I found on Amazon.
And to use these T wire tapping connectors, we simply cut off the insulation at the end of the red wire, exposing the wires themselves, and crimp on the male side of the connector. Then we just squeeze the female connector onto the wire we want to tap into, in this case the orange and white power wire for the cigarette lighter, and plug in the connector on our red wire. Now we're all wired up, but this mess of wires dangling in the footwell might be a little unsightly for the new owner of this bike. So I like to start bundling these smaller wires together with zip ties, and wrapping them in electrical tape for additional protection. Then bundle what's left with zip ties, securing it out of sight to the frame under the dash with more zip ties. If you're still watching and finding this helpful, share this video with a buddy who rides without a winch, or anyone you think might enjoy it. Now it's time for the serious moment of truth. Let's hook up our big red and black wires to the battery, and see if these switches make the winch work. Quick tip, you might find the bolt for the leads won't reach the square nut with the additional winch leads. To help lift the nut up, I just run a zip tie under it temporarily and pull the nut up, allowing me to get the bolt started. And this sound system is probably coming off of this machine, but with the addition of the winch and light bars, if the speakers and amp were staying on, I would probably consider an accessory battery for this bike. And if your winch doesn't work right away, don't stress. Troubleshooting is usually as simple as a wire in the wrong place or a poor connection, and you can see your winch instruction manual for more troubleshooting details. But since you watched this video and your winch does work, we can reinstall our center console with its 11 Torx 27 bolt and shifter knob with its Torx 25 star bolt, throw our seats back in, and enjoy a beer to a job well done.
So I really hope you found this RZR winch install video helpful. And if you did, do me a quick favor and give the video a thumbs up so I know we're on the right track here. And if you have any thoughts or suggestions on how I can improve these videos, or really any comments on this topic in general, please leave a comment in the section below. I'd love to hear from you. And of course, if you love Polaris as much as I do, you could always subscribe to this channel for more decent content. I'm Danny with Escape Powersports. I want to thank you for watching, and until next time, we'll see y'all on the trail.